The last thing I tasted in my first life was lake water. It was murky, freezing, and tasted faintly of gasoline from the boat engine idling above. The last thing I smelled was gin on Marcus's breath as he held my head under the surface. His hands, usually manicured and soft, were iron claws against my scalp. My lungs burned a fiery, expanding agony that eclipsed the cold surrounding me. Then, nothing, until I gasped, my body convulsing violently on a mattress that was far too soft. I sat bolt upright, my chest heaving, my hands clawing at my throat, expecting to feel the slick wetness of pondweed. Instead, my fingers brushed against expensive Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like cool water against my heated skin. The air didn't smell of engine fumes and muddy death. It smelled of lavender potpourri and beeswax polish from the antique furniture. My eyes darted around the room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The morning sun streamed through familiar, sheer curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden light. My antique oak vanity sat in the corner, holding the silver brush set my mother had given me before she died and left me with my stepmother. My favorite silk robe, the pale blue one I had ruined 3 years ago, spilling red wine during one of Marcus's terrifying rages, hung pristine on the closet door. I looked at my hands, turning them over slowly. They were smooth, unblemished, the thin white scar on my left wrist, a souvenir from an accidental fall down the marble stairs in 2026 when I tried to leave the house without permission, was gone. My skin felt too tight, too new. I scrambled out of bed, my legs shaking so badly I almost collapsed onto the thick Persian rug that dominated the center of the room. I stumbled to the full-length mirror, gripping the gilded frame until my knuckles turned white. The face staring back at me was 22 years old. The eyes were wide and haunted, reflecting a terror that didn't belong in this sunny room, but the skin was plump with youth, free of the tired lines and hidden shadows that had defined my late 20s. A calendar hung by the door, next to a velvet ribbons board holding invitations, the 14th of September 2023. Today was the day Marcus Whitmore, the city's golden boy, was going to propose at the annual Whitmore Garden Party. The realization hit me harder than the freezing lake water had. I wasn't dead. I was back. The universe, in some twisted act of benevolence, or perhaps supreme cruelty, had hit the rewind button. I was standing at the precipice of hell again, 5 years before the fall. A sharp, impatient knock on the door shattered the silence, making me jump violently. Before I could answer, the door swung open. Serena breezed in. My stepsister, the person I had trusted implicitly with every secret, every fear, right up until I found her texts on Marcus's secret burner phone 6 months before he killed me. "Clara, darling, you look ghastly," Serena said, stopping in the middle of the room. Her voice was light, effervescent, like cheap champagne that gives you a headache later. She walked toward me, and then it hit me, her scent. A thick, cloying cloud of synthetic jasmine perfume. It was her signature scent, something she marinated in. In my previous life, it used to just annoy me, but toward the end, it was the scent that clung to Marcus's collar when he came home late from business meetings that ran until 3 a.m. My stomach lurched violently. The smell of jasmine now reeked of betrayal and the coppery tang of blood. I took an involuntary step back, my spine hitting the cold glass of the mirror with a dull thud. Serena paused, her perfectly arched, darker-than-natural eyebrow raising in calculation. She was wearing a cream-colored silk cocktail dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her blonde hair was coiffed into an effortless-looking updraft that I knew had taken 2 hours and half a can of hairspray. She looked flawless, like a porcelain doll harboring a viper inside its hollow chest. "Jump strategy today?" she asked, looking me up and down with critical blue eyes that missed nothing. "Marcus is expecting perfection today, you know. Everyone knows he's going to pop the question. It's practically a royal decree." "Do they?" I managed to say. My own voice sounded strange to my ears, unused, weak, lacking the rough edge of 5 years of silent screaming. "Oh, please, Clara. Don't be coy. It's the social event of the season. Don't screw it up by looking like a drowned rat in front of the society page's photographers." She stepped closer, invading my personal space, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Her fingers were cold, her nails long and lacquered a violent, glossy shade of red that looked like fresh arterial blood. "I just want you to be happy, Clara. You know that, right? We're sisters." In my first life, I would have smiled gratefully, desperate for her approval. I would have thanked her for her concern, oblivious to the sarcasm dripping from her words. Now, I just saw the shark-like glint in her eyes. She wanted Marcus. She always had. Not for him, she barely knew the real him, but for the Whitmore name, the mansion on the hill, the unlimited black Amex card that she thought came with the title. She was terrified I would actually secure the bag today. I didn't smile. I just looked at her, letting my eyes go flat and dead, mirroring the emotion I felt inside. "I'm fine, Serena. Just pre-party jitters. It's a big day." She withdrew her hand, sensing the shift in me but unable to place it. I was usually so malleable, so easy to rattle. "Well, hurry up. Mother is already 3 martinis deep downstairs, and the car is waiting. You don't want to keep Prince Charming waiting. He gets irritable when he's kept waiting." She turned on her designer heel, the sound sharp against the hardwood floor between the rugs, and walked out, leaving a trail of suffocating jasmine in her wake that made my throat tighten. I stared at the closed door. Prince Charming, Marcus Whitmore. He was handsome in that devastating, Kennedy-esque way, wealthy beyond comprehension, charming when he wanted to be, and he was also a functioning alcoholic, with a gambling addiction that rivaled a small nation's GDP, and a violent streak he hid behind closed doors until the wedding ring was locked onto my finger. In my first life, I was so desperate for love, so eager to please my stepmother and Serena, to finally belong somewhere, that I ignored the red flags. I ignored the way he gripped my arm too tightly when I disagreed with him. I ignored the smell of breath mints masking whiskey at noon. I said yes. And I spent 5 years living in a gilded hell before he decided I was worth more dead for the $10 million life insurance policy he had taken out on me. I walked to the closet, my bare feet silent on the wood. My hands were steady now. The panic had crystallized into something else entirely. Something cold, hard, and heavy, sitting in my gut like a smooth river stone. I wasn't going to save myself by running away. That was too messy, too suspicious. Stepmother would hunt me down and drag me back. I had a better idea. A much colder idea. I dressed slowly, deliberately. I chose a dress that was beautiful but slightly understated, a dusty rose chiffon number that flowed around my body, making me look meek, malleable, the perfect victim. I applied minimal makeup, just enough to cover the paleness of shock, but not enough to look formidable. When I walked downstairs, the air in the grand foyer smelled of my stepmother's expensive leather luggage stacked by the door for her upcoming trip to Milan and the sharp juniper tang of her 3rd gin Ricky. Finally, stepmother snapped, snapping her gold compact mirror shut with a sound like a pistol crack. She was pacing by the door, her Chanel suit immaculate, her face already tight with gin-fueled irritation. "Try not to fade into the wallpaper today, Clara. Marcus needs a wife who can stand next to him and look the part, not hide behind him like a frightened child." "Yes, mother," I said softly, lowering my eyes in feigned submission. Serena was waiting by the door, checking her reflection in the beveled glass panel, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle from her silk dress. She smirked at my reflection in the glass. "Don't worry, Mother. If Clara can't handle the spotlight, I'm sure someone else is willing to step in and save the family face." She had no idea how right she was, and I was going to give her the chance. The Whitmore estate, was a sprawling expanse of manicured lawns that looked freshly painted green, ancient oak trees that provided deep, cool shade and ostentatious wealth that screamed from every marble statue and perfectly trimmed hedge. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, expensive catering, the rich scent of truffle oil and roasting meat drifting from the enormous white tents, and the subtle, metallic scent of old money that permeates everything it touches. A string quartet played Mozart in the wrought iron gazebo near the rose garden. Waiters in severe white jackets and gloves circulated with silver trays of champagne in delicate crystal flutes. The glassware chimed delicately as people took drinks, a sound that used to symbolize elegance and belonging to me. Now, it just sounded like brittle ice cracking underfoot. I saw Marcus across the lawn. He was holding court near the 18th century stone fountain, laughing loudly at something a state senator was saying. He looked devastatingly handsome, in a tailored, navy Italian suit that fit him like a second skin. His hair was perfectly swept back, glinting in the sun, his smile easy and bright, showing off expensive dental veneers. But I was watching closely this time. I wasn't blinded by the dazzling exterior. I saw the slight tick in his jaw when the senator interrupted him for a second time. I saw how his knuckles turned white around his cut crystal Scotch glass, as if he wanted to crush it. I smelled the faint, sour odor of stale alcohol sweat trying to push through his expensive, musky sandalwood cologne as I approached. It was the scent of a man who hadn't stopped drinking since the night before. "Clara, my darling." He detached himself from the group smoothly and strode toward me, arms outstretched, performing the role of the adoring boyfriend for the audience. He kissed my cheek. His lips were cold, and his skin felt clammy. "You look lovely." As always. "A vision in pink. Thank you, Marcus," I said. My voice was even, devoid of the breathless adoration that used to drip from every word I spoke to him. "Come, walk with me. The rose garden is particularly spectacular right now. The white albas are in full bloom." This was it. The script was running exactly as before. The predetermined path to my destruction. We walked away from the crowd, down a gravel path toward the secluded rose garden. The scent of hundreds of heritage roses was overwhelming, thick and sweet, almost cloying in the afternoon heat, masking the underlying smell of damp earth and manure fertilizer. He stopped by a carved marble bench, under a trellis laden with heavy white blooms that looked like clustered snow. He took both my hands in his. His palms were slightly damp with nervous sweat. "Clara," he began, his voice dropping to that practiced husky octave that used to make my knees weak and my brain fuzzy. "We've known each other for 2 years now, and I have to say, you are the most gracious, patient woman I've ever met. You bring a sense of calm to my chaotic world. Gracious, patient. Code words for doormat. Code words for someone who wouldn't ask where he was until 4 a.m. He dropped to one knee. The expensive gravel crunched loudly under his Italian loafer, a harsh sound in the quiet garden. He pulled a black velvet box from his pocket and snapped it open. A 5-carat oval diamond glittered fiercely in the afternoon sun. It was cold fire trapped in platinum. It was beautiful. It was heavy. It was the most expensive chain I had ever seen. "Clara Vance, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Let's build a dynasty together." The silence stretched. A robin chirped nearby on a branch, oblivious to the human drama. I looked down at him. I didn't see the ring. I remembered his hands around my throat. I remembered him throwing this very ring at my face in a drunken rage one night, cutting my cheek just below the eye, because I asked him why $300,000 was missing from our joint investment account. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt only a profound, icy detachment, as if I were watching a play from the balcony seats. I gently withdrew my hands from his damp grip, No, Marcus, I said clearly. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the heavy floral air like a scalpel. His perfect, practiced smile froze on his face. It didn't drop immediately. It just hung there, brittle and confused, like a mask that had slipped. I'm sorry? The acoustics in here. I thought I heard you say no. You did, I said, taking a small, deliberate step back, putting distance between myself and the kneeling predator. I cannot marry you, Marcus. He stood up slowly, dusting off his knee, the movement stiff. The charm began to evaporate like steam off a hot sidewalk, revealing the sharp, ugly edges beneath. Is this a joke, Clara? Because it's not funny. Everyone is waiting out there for the announcement. My parents, the press. It's not a joke. I don't love you, Marcus. Not in that way. And if you're honest with yourself, you don't love me. You love that I'm safe, that I won't challenge you, that I look good on your arm. His face darkened, a flush rising from his neck. The thick blue vein in his temple began to throb visibly. A warning sign I knew too well. It was the precursor to the explosion. You ungrateful little bitch, he hissed, his voice low and guttural so no one else could hear. The smell of scotch on his breath intensified, acrid and hot. Do you have any idea what I'm offering you? Do you know how many women would kill to stand where you are right now? Yes, I said calmly, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. I do. I looked past him, toward the arched entrance of the rose garden. Serena was standing there, hovering at the edge of the scene, partially hidden by a climbing rose bush. She was feigning a polite distance, while straining to overhear every word. She looked like a cat watching a canary fall out of its nest, ready to pounce. I think, I said, raising my voice just enough so it carried over the roses to her ears, that there are other women far better suited to the lifestyle you require, Marcus. Women with more ambition, more fire. Someone who wants this life more than I do. Marcus followed my gaze, his neck snapping around. He saw Serena. Serena saw him looking. She immediately adopted a pose of concerned innocence, one hand fluttering to her chest in fake surprise, her blue eyes wide and shimmering. Marcus looked back at me, his massive ego bruised, his anger simmering just below the surface. He couldn't believe he was being rejected by the mouse. The sure thing. You're making a massive mistake, Clara, he sneered, stepping closer, trying to intimidate me with his height. You'll regret this for the rest of your miserable, mediocre life. You'll end up with nothing. Perhaps, I said, unflinching. But it's my mistake to make. I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I walked with a steady, measured pace, feeling the gravel crunch satisfyingly under my own shoes now. As I passed the entrance to the garden, Serena grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, her nails digging sharply into my flesh through the chiffon sleeves. The blast of jasmine scent flared, making my nose twitch. What the hell did you just do? She whispered furiously, her face inches from mine. Are you insane? You just threw away a winning lottery ticket. Mother is going to kill you. I stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the layers of expensive makeup and the designer dress, I saw the desperate hunger, the yawning emptiness inside her that she thought money and status could fill. I just don't want it, Serena, I said softly, making my voice sound weary, overwhelmed. It's too much pressure. Being a Whitmore, he needs someone stronger than me, someone who can handle the spotlight. Someone like you. Her eyes widened. The anger melted away instantly, replaced by a dawning realization, and then naked, terrifying greed. Me? She breathed, the word escaping her lips like a prayer. He was furious, I whispered, leaning closer, conspiring with my enemy. His ego is crushed. He needs someone to calm him down right now, someone who understands him and his world. Go to him, Serena. Before he does something rash, he's vulnerable. I pulled my arm free from her loosening grip and continued walking toward. I heard the crunch of gravel faster this time, urgent as Serena practically ran toward the garden. I heard her voice, syrupy sweet, soothing his bruised ego, pouring oil on the troubled waters. Oh, Marcus, you poor darling. How could she? You deserve so much better than that little mouse. I reached the stone terrace and grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter's tray. The crystal was icy cold against my fingertips. I took a sip. It was crisp, dry, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, it tasted like freedom. The trap was set. The bait, a shining diamond-encrusted bear trap, was taken. Now, I just had to wait for the snap. Continue. Continue. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely predictable. My stepmother screamed at me for 3 solid hours in the drawing room that night, her face varying shades of burgundy that matched the upholstery. She called me an ungrateful fool, a sabotaging little viper who had ruined the family's best chance at permanent financial security. She threw a heavy baccarat crystal vase at my head. It shattered against the oak paneling inches from my ear, raining razor-sharp glass shards onto the polished hardwood floor. The sound was explosive, violent, and oddly satisfying. It was the sound of ties breaking. "Get out!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger toward the front door, her gin splashing from her glass onto the expensive rug. "You are no daughter of mine. Pack your trash and leave tonight. You get nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked upstairs and packed my bags. I took only what was truly mine clothes I had bought with my own small allowance over the years, my collection of paperback books, and my mother's silver brush set. I left the expensive jewelry Marcus had given me, the designer handbags he had bought as apology gifts in the previous life, preemptive apologies in this one, and the suffocating atmosphere of that house. I moved into a studio apartment on the gritty east side of the city the next day, using the meager savings I had hidden away. It was tiny. The kitchen faucet dripped with a rhythmic, maddening plink, plink, plink that no amount of wrench turning could fix. The hallway smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage and stale, cheap cigarette smoke, drifting up from the neighbor below. The carpet was a scratchy, industrial brown nylon that felt rough and abrasive against my bare feet. I loved it. It was mine. It was real. It didn't smell of jasmine or expensive Scotch masking decay. I got a job at a small, struggling family-owned bakery 3 blocks away. The hours were brutal, up at 4 a.m. every morning to start the ovens. My hands, once soft and pampered with expensive creams, became dusted with flour, dry from constant washing, and calloused from kneading heavy dough. They smelled of live yeast and caramelized sugar, a warm, earthy, deeply human scent that grounded me in reality. My bank account was meager, hovering near zero most weeks, but every dollar in it was one I earned with my own sweat, without having to sell my soul or hide bruises with expensive concealer. Meanwhile, Serena's ascent was meteoric and blindingly fast. Less than a month after my rejection, Marcus proposed to Serena. The rebound velocity was staggering. The announcement was splashed across the social pages of every city paper, accompanied by a professional photo of them looking radiantly happy. The ring on her finger was even bigger than the one he had offered me, a gaudy emerald-cut diamond that looked heavy enough to break her slender wrist. It must have cost him a fortune he didn't have. They came into the bakery about 3 months later. It was purely accidental on their part. They were heading to a high-end boutique nearby for a fitting and wanted coffee, and my shop was the closest. When the door chimed, I was behind the counter, pulling a heavy tray of steaming cinnamon buns from the industrial oven. The blast of rich, sugary heat filled the air, temporarily masking everything else. Serena stopped dead in the doorway when she saw me. She was wearing a blinding white cashmere coat that probably cost more than my annual rent, perfectly tailored to her body. Marcus was behind her, looking every inch the master of the universe in a charcoal gray power suit, his hair slicked back. "Clara?" Serena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in mock surprise. The sickly sweet jasmine perfume wafted over the counter, warring with the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon. "My God, what are you doing here? You look quaint." It was an insult, wrapped in thin pity. She looked down her nose at my apron, which was stained with flour and butter, and my hair tied back in a messy, practical bun. "I work here, Serena," I said flatly, sliding the hot tray onto the cooling rack and wiping my hands on a towel. "What can I get you?" Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between Serena and the counter. He eyed me with a strange mixture of disdain and something else. Was it curiosity? A flicker of bruised ego that I was surviving without him? "A large black coffee," he ordered, his voice curt, barely acknowledging me as a person. "And whatever my fiancé wants." He emphasized the word fiancé heavily, flashing a possessive smirk at Serena, his hand resting heavily on the nape of her neck. Serena leaned into his touch, draping herself against his arm, making sure I saw the massive rock on her finger glitter under the fluorescent lights. "Oh, Marcus, darling, you spoil me. I'll have a skinny vanilla latte, extra foam, and maybe one of those little biscotti." The chocolate-dipped one. She looked at me, her eyes shining with hard-won triumph. "We're finalizing the wedding venue today with the planner, the Plaza Ballroom. Can you imagine? It's going to be the event of the decade. Mother is in her element." "Sounds expensive," I said, punching the order into the old, clunky cash register. The machine made a loud, satisfying ka-ching sound. "Quality always is," Marcus said smoothly, pulling a sleek black titanium credit card from his wallet. He tossed it onto the counter. It hit the laminate with a sharp, arrogant plastic thwack. I picked up the card. It was heavy, cold. I ran it. It went through instantly. Of course it did. They were still in the honeymoon phase, the phase where he bought her things to secure her loyalty, using debt to build a golden cage around her, making her complicit in his facade before she even realized it. So, Serena leaned in conspiratorially while Marcus checked his platinum watch, the jasmine smell intensifying until I could taste it on the back of my throat. "Are you happy, Clara? Really? Living the simple life? It must be so hard for you after everything we grew up with." I looked around the small bakery. The worn wooden tables that wobbled slightly, the steam rising lazily from the coffee machine, the elderly couple in the corner sharing a scone and reading a physical newspaper. It wasn't glamorous. There was no champagne, but it was real. Nobody was afraid here. "Yes, Serena," I said, meeting her gaze directly, letting her see the calm in my eyes. "I am. Are you? Happy?" She let out a tinkling, brittle laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Darling, I'm marrying Marcus Whitmore. I'm ecstatic. I have everything you were too scared to take. I won." "Then, congratulations are in order," I said, turning to make their drinks. I slid the cardboard cups across the counter a moment later. They took their drinks and turned to leave, the transaction over. As they pushed open the glass door, I saw Marcus's hand slide down from her neck to rest on the small of Serena's back. To an outsider, it looked affectionate, protective, but I knew that grip. His fingers were digging in slightly. It was a steering mechanism, a subtle, physical assertion of control, guiding her exactly where he wanted her to go. As the door swung shut, cutting off the jasmine scent and the cold winter air, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. It left my knees weak for a moment. The trap had snapped shut. Serena was inside, and she was still celebrating the cheese, completely unaware of the spring-loaded steel bar that was already pressing against her neck. I went back to the dough mixer. The rhythm was meditative. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. The physical labor was cleansing, working the tension out of my own body. 6 months passed. The wedding was, as predicted, obscene in its extravagance. I didn't attend, though Serena sent a passive-aggressive invitation, likely hoping I would show up so she could gloat in person. I saw the photos online, splashed across every social media platform. Serena looked stunning, if a bit manic, in a custom Vera Wang gown that was impossibly tight. Marcus looked princely, the perfect groom, but I had the benefit of hindsight. If you looked closely at the high-resolution photos, past the filters and the professional lighting, you could see the strain around Marcus's eyes, the slight puffiness that suggested he was drinking heavily again, the redness in the whites of his eyes that Visine couldn't quite hide, and in one candid shot, taken at the reception when she thought no one was looking, Serena wasn't smiling. She was looking off camera with an expression of profound, exhausted terror. Her left hand, subconsciously covering her right wrist, rubbing the skin there. My first real, tangible confirmation that the cracks were forming came on a rainy Tuesday night in November. I was closing up the bakery alone. The rain was hammering against the large front window in sheets, blurring the city lights outside into streaks of neon. The air inside smelled of wet pavement emanating from my own shoes and cold, damp coffee grounds I was cleaning from the machine. The front door jerked open, bringing a gust of freezing, damp wind and a frantic figure tumbling inside. It was Serena. She looked nothing like the glowing bride from the magazine spreads. Her expensive beige Burberry trench coat was soaked through, the fabric darkened to a muddy brown. Her blonde hair was plastered to her skull. Her mascara ran in dark rivulets down her cheeks, smudged beneath her eyes, giving her the appearance of a deranged raccoon. The inevitable scent of jasmine was there, but it was sour now, mixed with the metallic tang of high adrenaline and stale fear. "Clara," she gasped, breathless, her chest heaving as if she had run all the way from the Whitmore estate. Oh God, I need to talk to you. Please." I finished wiping down the stainless steel counter, moving methodically. "We're closed, Serena. You need to leave. Please," she begged, her voice cracking into a sob. She rushed to the counter and leaned against it for support, her hands shaking violently. I saw it then. As her sleeve rode up, a faint, yellowish-purple bruise peeked out from the cuff of her expensive coat on her left forearm. My stomach tightened into a hard knot. PTSD is a strange beast. It sleeps with one eye open, even though I was safe, even though it wasn't my body this time. The sight of that specific discoloration sent a phantom throb through my own arm. I remembered the first time Marcus had grabbed me too hard, leaving marks just like that because I hadn't had dinner ready precisely at 6. He had apologized profusely the next day, crying, buying me diamond stud earrings as penance. I knew exactly where Serena was in the cycle. The beginning of the end. I didn't offer comfort. I couldn't. To offer comfort was to get involved, to open a door to the chaos I had just escaped. My survival depended on absolute detachment. "What do you want, Serena?" I asked coldly, keeping the counter between us like a shield. "I need money," she whispered, her eyes darting over her shoulder at the rain-streaked window, as if expecting Marcus's sleek black car to materialize out of the storm. "Just a loan. A short-term loan. Until next month." "Money?" I raised an eyebrow, letting a dry chuckle escape. "You married a Whitmore, Serena. You're supposed to be swimming in money like Scrooge McDuck." A hysterical, choked laugh escaped her lips, sounding more like a cough. "It's complicated. Marcus is having some liquidity issues right now in the market. Temporary, of course. It's just a cash flow thing. But he's frozen my supplementary cards. He says I'm spending too much, that I need to learn discipline. discipline. Another one of Marcus's favorite words, a weaponized word. How much do you need? I asked. 5,000. Just 5,000. Enough to cover some bills I have, some personal things he doesn't know about so he doesn't get angry. I looked at her. The desperation was palpable, radiating off her in waves. The golden facade was dissolving right in front of my eyes, revealing the terrified girl beneath. I don't have $5,000, Serena, I said truthfully. I make $12 an hour baking bread. My rent is $800 a month. Do the math. Her face crumbled completely. The mask fell away. You have to. You must have something. What about your trust fund from Mother? The rainy day fund. Mother cut me off the day I moved out. I reminded her sharply. You were there. You toasted to it with champagne. Remember? She stared at me, her eyes wide with panic. Then, the anger returned, the defensive mechanism of a cornered animal lashing out. This is your fault, she hissed, slamming her wet hand on the counter, leaving a damp imprint. You knew something. That's why you said no. You tricked me into this. You set me up. I tricked you into marrying a handsome, charming millionaire? I retorted, my voice dry as day-old toast. Serena, you practically sprinted down that aisle. You stepped over me to get to him. You got exactly what you wanted. It's not what I wanted. He's not. He changes, Clara. When the doors close. He gets so angry over little things. The way I chew, the way I dress. If I'm 5 minutes late coming home, she was trembling violently now, tears streaming down her face again. The jasmine perfume was making me dizzy with memory. Sounds like a traditional marriage, I said quietly, turning my back on her to begin stacking the metal chairs on the tables. The screech of metal legs on the floor was loud in the tense silence. You made your bed, Serena. You cold bitch. She spat out, her voice guttural with hate and despair. How can you be so heartless? I'm your sister. I paused, holding a metal chair midair. The cold steel bit into my palms. I'm just minding my own business. Something you should have done a year ago instead of coveting mine. She stared at my back for a moment longer, then turned and fled back into the rain. A broken, soaking figure in expensive clothes that offered no warmth. I watched her go through the glass, feeling a terrible, vast empty. I took no joy in this visualization of my past life. It wasn't victory. It was just tragic, mathematical inevitability. Things escalated quickly after that night. The snowball had started rolling down the hill. The rumors started in the dry financial pages of the Wall Street Journal. Whispered hints about liquidity problems at Whitmore Enterprises. Then they moved to the tabloids, blind items, about a prominent socialite couple on the rocks due to volatile behavior. Marcus's house of cards, built entirely on leveraged debt, Ponzi-like investor shuffling, and deceit, was beginning to sway in the wind. I saw him one more time before the final collapse. I was walking home from the bakery on a crisp December evening late at night. The air was sharp and cold, smelling of impending snow and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Marcus was stumbling out of a seedy dive bar downtown, miles away from his usual high-end haunts. He looked awful. His expensive suit was rumpled, stained with something dark on the lapel. He hadn't shaved in days. Dark, patchy stubble shadowing his jaw. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, darting around suspiciously at shadows. He saw me across the street under a flickering streetlight. He stopped, swaying slightly on the cracked sidewalk. The wind changed, and the smell of cheap, rot-gut gin wafted across the frosty air, hitting me like a physical blow to the chest. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the divide. In his eyes, I saw a flicker of the man he used to pretend to be the charming prince, followed instantly by a tidal wave of incoherent rage and profound regret. He took a step toward me, his mouth opening in a snarl, his hands balling into fists. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground on the pavement, clutching my canvas tote bag filled with day-old bread. I wasn't his victim anymore. I was a ghost he couldn't touch. A police siren wailed nearby, getting closer. Marcus flinched violently at the sound, like a cur dog expecting a kick. He shot me one last look of pure, distilled venom, then turned and stumbled down a dark alleyway, disappearing into the shadows like a rat. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic rhythm. But I was safe. I breathed in the cold, clean December air, expelling the phantom scent of his gin from my lungs. The end was near. Continue. Continue. 2 days later, the dam broke. The news broke early in the morning. I was at the bakery, pulling the first loaves of sourdough from the stone oven. The little television in the break room, usually set to a cheerful morning show, was blaring breaking news. Federal agents raided the Whitmore estate at dawn this morning, the anchor said, her voice grave. I went into the break room, wiping flour from my hands. The footage was chaotic, shaky helicopter shots, looking down on the mansion I used to live in. Police cars with flashing red and blue lights swarmed the driveway like angry beetles. Then, the shot changed to the ground level. Marcus, handcuffed, was being shoved into the back of a federal vehicle by 2 agents in windbreakers. His hair was a mess, his face a mask of furious, arrogant disbelief. He looked smaller than I remembered, pathetic, and then a brief, devastating shot of the front door. Serena was standing there, flanked by a female officer. She was wearing a silk bathrobe, her hair matted on one side where she had slept on it. She wasn't wearing any makeup. Her face was swollen, puffy from crying or worse. Her eyes were hollowed-out craters of despair, staring blankly at the camera's flashbulbs. She looked like a ghost haunting the ruins of her own life. She looked exactly how I had felt every day for 5 years. The visuals were shocking to the public, but the details that emerged over the next few hours were worse. Marcus Whitmore had been arrested for massive wire fraud, money laundering, and running a complex Ponzi scheme that had defrauded investors of hundreds of millions. The Whitmore fortune was a mirage. It was all debt and stolen money. That evening, when I got back to my tiny apartment, bone-tired from the day's work and the emotional weight of the news, she was there. Serena was sitting on the dirty floor in the hallway outside my door, knees pulled to her chest. She didn't even look up when my footsteps approached on the creaky floorboards. She was shivering uncontrollably, wrapped in a thin cardigan that wasn't nearly warm enough for December. The overwhelming jasmine scent was gone, replaced by the raw, human smell of unwashed hair, dried sweat, and stale fear. I unlocked the door, the sound loud in the quiet hallway. "Come in." She stood up slowly, using the wall for support, and followed me inside silently. My apartment was warm, smelling faintly of the lavender detergent I used on my sheets, a clean, safe smell. She collapsed onto my cheap futon, pulling her knees back up to her chest, making herself as small as possible. "They took everything," she said, her voice monotone. "Dead. The feds. They put seals on the doors. They took the cars, Mother's jewelry, emptied the bank accounts. They even took my engagement ring off my finger as evidence. They said it was bought with stolen funds. The proceeds of crime." I went to the tiny kitchenette and turned on the electric kettle. The water began to rumble. "He hit me," she whispered to the room. Before the police kicked down the door, he was frantic, trying to shred documents. He blamed me. He shouted that I spent too much, that my greed drew attention to us, that I ruined him. She reached up with a trembling hand and pulled down the collar of her cardigan. A massive, purple-black bruise covered the side of her elegant neck, disappearing down toward her shoulder blade. It was ugly, brutal, the shape of fingers clearly visible. I stared at the bruise. The sight of it was a physical impact. I remembered one just like it, in my first life. After I asked Marcus why there was a charge from a Vegas hotel on a weekend, He said he was on a business trip to Chicago. The kettle whistled sharply, snapping me back. I poured hot water over 2 cheap tea bags and ceramic mugs that didn't match. I walked over and handed her a mug. The steam rose, warming my face. "Drink this," I said. She took the mug with trembling hands, the ceramic clattering against her teeth as she tried to take a sip. She gulped the hot liquid down as if she were starving. She looked up at me then, her eyes pleading for answers, for absolution, for me to fix it. "Why, Clara? Why did this happen to me? We were supposed to have everything. It was my turn." I sat down in the rickety wooden chair opposite the futon, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my own tea. It was hot, floral, and calming. "You wanted the golden goose, Serena?" I said quietly, stating a fact. "You never stopped to ask where the gold came from. You didn't care, as long as you got to spend it." She stared into the dark liquid of her tea. "Did you know? Did you know he was a criminal when you said no?" I suspected he was living beyond his means. I lied smoothly. I couldn't tell her the truth about the rebirth. That would make me the villain, or a lunatic. But I knew he was cruel. I saw it in his eyes that day in the garden when I rejected him. The mask slipped. That's why I said no. I chose poverty over that. She looked up, a weak flicker of the old fire returning to her eyes. "And you let me walk right into it. You didn't warn me. You even encouraged me to go comfort him. You fed me to him. Would you have listened?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "Be honest, Serena. If I had told you Marcus was a monster and a fraud, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was just jealous, trying to sabotage you so I could keep him for myself?" She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. The truth hung heavy and undeniable in the air between us. Her greed had been deafening. "You saw what you wanted to see, Serena. You saw the diamonds, the mansion, the last name. You didn't look at the man holding them out to you." She began to sob again. Ragged, ugly sounds that filled the small room. "What am I going to do? I have nothing. No money, no home. Mother won't even take my call. She's at a spa in Switzerland, terrified of being implicated, pretending I don't exist." "You'll survive," I said, standing up and taking her empty mug. "You'll get a job. A real one. You'll find a cheap apartment with roommates. You'll learn to live without $500 face creams and drivers." "Like you?" She sneered through her tears, gesturing weakly around my shabby apartment. "Yes, like me." I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights blinking in the cold night. "It's not much, Serena. It's hard work, but it's real. It's mine, and nobody hits me here." She fell silent. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. The ride was over. The golden carriage had turned back into a pumpkin, and the pumpkin was rotting. "Can I stay here tonight?" she asked, her voice small, childlike. "Please, I have nowhere else to go. It's cold outside." I looked at her. My sister. My enemy. The woman who would have happily watched me rot in that marriage if the roles were reversed. "One night," I said. "You can sleep on the futon. Tomorrow morning you leave. You start figuring this out on your own." I went into the tiny bathroom to brush my teeth. I looked in the mirror above the sink. The face staring back was calm, composed. There was no triumph in my eyes, only a deep, abiding weariness. I hadn't saved Serena. I hadn't tried to. I had thrown her to the wolf to save myself. It was cold. It was calculating. It was exactly what she would have done to me, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Continue. Continue. The next morning, Serena was gone before I woke up. The futon was neatly folded back into a couch. She had washed her mug and left it on the drying rack. There was no note. The fallout continued for months. The trial was a media circus. Marcus, stripped of his expensive lawyers when the money ran out, looked haggard and pathetic in his orange jumpsuit. He was eventually sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The bankruptcy proceedings for Whitmore Enterprises dragged on endlessly, stripping the family name of every dime and every shred of dignity it had left. My stepmother remained in Europe, living off a hidden account, permanently estranged from the ruin she had helped facilitate. Serena disappeared from the social scene completely. I heard rumors through the grapevine a year later. Someone said they saw her working as a hostess in a mid-range chain restaurant in another city, looking tired and older than her years. Another rumor said she was living in a cramped basement apartment with 3 roommates taking the bus to work. It was a long, hard fall from the mansion on the hill. I stayed at the bakery. I worked hard, saved every penny I could. Eventually, the elderly owners decided it was time to retire. They offered to sell the business to me for a fair price, knowing I would care for it. It took every dime I had saved, plus a terrifying small business loan from the bank, but I bought it. It's mine now. Clara's Daily Bread. I'm standing in the kitchen right now. It's early, the dawn light just beginning to creep through the high windows in shafts of dusty blue. The city outside is still quiet. The air inside is thick and warm, heavy with the sour, complex smell of sourdough starter bubbling in its vats, and the earthy scent of baking rye bread. It's a good smell. An honest smell. I reach into a 50-pound sack of flour, the fine white powder coating my skin, cool and soft as silk. I lift a scoop, watching the dust mote dance in a sunbeam. I am alone. I am poor by the standards of my old life. My hands are rough, my knuckles slightly swollen, and my back aches with a dull throb at the end of every long day. But I am alive. And, finally, for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I am completely free.